Hi, I'm Sumit Bose, and this is the Net Hero podcast. Who's it for? It's for you. If you care about the planet and you care about business. We believe that businesses are responsible for a lot of the damage that has been done to the planet, but they're also responsible for finding the solutions. We need innovation, we need ideas, we need people who are trying to make a difference, and that's what this podcast is about. If you know someone who is trying to make a change, then get them to come along on the podcast. Listen in every week, subscribe, and make sure that you follow us on social media. Our two news platforms, Energy Live News and Future Net Zero, cover everything we do. And this episode is recorded live, so enjoy. I wash my clothes regularly. Well, I'd say pretty much every couple of days. But we're also doing a lot of greenwashing, aren't we? I mean, that's lame, but I couldn't think of a better way into this podcast. Now, for some people, greenwashing sounds like a bullshit term. But in essence, it's become quite a big problem. It's someone claiming that they're doing something because being green is seen as better, being net zero is seen as better. But actually, when you dig down, you find they're not doing it. And that leads to a lot of resentment. In the very polarized world of social media and what we've got going on right now, this can lead to big damage, reputation risk for loads of companies. And we've seen it. We've seen the headlines that we've covered on Energy Live News, companies claiming they're doing things, from things like carbon credits to kind of what they're using in terms of building materials. And a lot of this seems to be a real conundrum between, are they doing it deliberately to try and mislead people, or are people making genuine mistakes? I probably think it's a bit of both. But I've got an expert today who can help us understand all of that. I'd like to say I'm joined by Helen Neal, who has been everything. Helen, you've fought wars, doing war studies. You've been in Parliament as a parliamentary researcher. You've been advising big firms. You've worked in aviation and you've worked in the world of motors and transportation. So you've looked at the whole carbon thing. So first of all, thank you for joining me on the podcast. And it's really good you got in touch with LinkedIn. So thanks for that.
No, thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here. Yeah, so that's you've really covered exactly where I've sort of worked for the past sort of 25 years or so. But yeah, very much in that kind of regulatory, political, communication space,
Yeah.
but gradually more and more getting involved in that kind of sustainability, CO2, net zero debate that was massive a couple of years ago. But of
Yeah.
course, we've seen a very different transition that's happened over the past couple of years as well.
You've done communications, right?
Hmm.
For years, like same as me. And
Yeah.
in essence, let me throw the first grenade at you. Do you think people actively try and greenwash? I think there's probably some of that. Or do you think people do things, particularly businesses, not really knowing what the picture is, and then they find themselves falling foul of it because they haven't checked their facts? How do you see it?
I think that 99.9% of businesses actually never set out to greenwash. I mean,
But
why
they
would
never
you?
set out to mislead, you don't think?
I don't think so.
Yeah.
I'm an optimist, but genuinely from what I've seen, I think most businesses don't. The reason why I don't think they do is that they know to a certain degree this will have a negative backlash on them, whether that's from a reputational point of view or whether
Mm.
that's potentially through regulatory fines, right? So there's no real great incentive for them to do it intentionally. But I think there is always that very small percentage that simply just don't care and
Yeah.
wear it as a badge of honor, right? And we will put
Hmm.
those in one particular camp. But the rest of them, genuinely, I believe, do not set out to greenwash. But there are some fundamental reasons why this happens to them. Um, Whether it's something to do with an element around structural, and we can talk about that. But there's also an area around just lack of expertise, information, and process of thinking of how to approach this, I think.
It's an interesting one because, I kind of agree. I wouldn't say it's 99.9. I think you're a bit more positive than me. But I do think the vast majority of companies, for sure, in the last, 16 years that we've been going, I haven't met people who've deliberately gone out to try and hoodwink the public or stuff. But I have seen companies guilty of doing things that are bad, environmental damage, causing loads of issues, and then pretending that actually they did it right. There's been a breakdown. If you could sort of categorize greenwashing, and I said it's a kind of woolly thing, how would you sum it up for someone as a kind of phrase? What do you think it actually means?
I mean, most of the time with greenwashing, it's about saying something around your environmental impact, but not being able to prove it. That is essentially what it boils down to. So if you
Yeah.
make a statement on your environmental credentials, but you don't have the facts, the data, the verification in which to back up that statement, that's when you start to get into this murky realms of greenwashing and you get in trouble. So it's and even some claims, right, they can be technically true, but
Hmm.
even if you don't have some of that information, it's not there by omission, and that's the information and the backup is not there. That is still classed as greenwashing. So it's essentially you're withholding information or you're trying to put things in the best possible light without that facts and data to back it up.
Why would you do that? That's a real interesting question, isn't it? Why would you claim to do it? You know, it's that classic thing in journalism, right? We have the defenses, and the greatest defense is justification. It's true, and I can prove it's true. That's the one everyone should be doing. So, why do you think businesses, particularly like you were talking about just earlier on, that, a few years ago in 2019, 20, the whole, you know, COVID period, everyone was signing up to net zero. Everyone's making, we're going to do this by 2030, 2040, whatever it is. Do you think there's been an element of um, blame PR and the marketing people? Hey, we got to get onto this bandwagon. Let's say what we're doing because this will look good to the public, and
Do,
that makes people make claims which actually they can't prove.
I think you hit the nail right on the head. That was definitely a trend that was happening. We saw a
Yeah,
lot of companies, trying to make all these fantastical kind of not just claims, but all of these great ambitions, right? A couple of years ago. I think there is a structural problem that is inherent, particularly in a lot of corporates, why this has happened. So, on the one hand, if you think about it, you've got your PR and your marketing teams that sit in one place.
yeah.
You've got your sustainability teams that are sat down in some kind of back office, just a few of them crunching some data. And then you might have your legal team,
Mm.
none of whom sit in the same room and sit down and get all of their ducks in a row to think about this from
Generally, none of them really like each other either.
correct, because all the different aspects, there's a lot of tension between
Yeah,
what they're
yeah,
all trying to
yeah.
do. So when you're getting to the point of a sustainability team who've got all this great data, they're all ready to publish their reports and they want to put it out there, that's when the marketing and the comms and the corporate affairs teams take over and they look at that and they say, you know what, we've got to put this in the best light. We've got to
Great
make this kind of just
story.
sound a
Yeah.
little bit more
Mm.
sexy. How do we get
Yeah.
that out there?
Mhm.
And it is at that point of that handover between those two worlds where you then want to take this information and actually make it look better, perhaps make it look a little bit clearer and neater, perhaps take out some of that facts and data because it's very boring. How do we make it snappy? How do we put it out there to the consumer and the investors in the best possible light? And the moment you start to think about this kind of information being positioned in the best possible light, that is the moment where you get unstuck. That is the moment where you start to greenwash. And I think
But
that's happening a lot within businesses.
you would think, though, let's put it this way, right? I think we're really having a conversation about big firms really right now, aren't we? Because I think smaller firms you can sort of forgive, and generally I don't find smaller firms making, funnily enough, the claims. Big ones kind of do. But having worked, like you said, you've worked in corporates, they have massive teams. How do these things get through? Because there must be some check or balance that says, whoa, 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 we can't claim that because we can't prove it. And it'll take some, you know, jerk like Sumit Bose to come and push that button and say, well, how can you prove that? So why do you think that disconnect happens in these big corporates, who are very well geared up to exactly do what you're saying? Check a message, make sure it's right, and then put it out.
Think it comes down to a lack of kind of cross pollination between those
Yeah,
departments of sitting down and kind of working it through together. I don't think that happens. I also don't think that those different teams are equipped with the right tools and thinking to help them when they approach this information. So if you think about a marketing team or a
yeah.
comms team, their whole premise is to think about how do we position our company in the best light possible? How do we make ourselves look good? And so, with all of that kind of sustainability information, where you're needing to put verification, backup data, show how you've got from A to B and what your pathway is to get there, all of that stuff is not something that they want to include. Or indeed, when they're starting to put that kind of comms plan together, that stuff just isn't in their mindset because it's not the way that their discipline works. And conversely, with sustainability, we've all seen or not seen, as the case may be, the reports that get put on the back end of a website to gather dust each year as a sustainability report because they're deathly dull and nobody reads them.
Correct. Yeah,
So you've
yeah.
got these two kind of dichotomies going on, but you're absolutely right. These are big companies, they have extremely talented, large, well-resourced teams, yet many of them are still getting caught with greenwashing. Many of them have got fines because they have been caught greenwashing. So it's a structural issue, I think, within these departments. And I think it's a lack of education and awareness about how to approach this kind of data and information, how you put that out in the public domain properly. And it is going to get worse for them because there is more regulation coming that is much more specific about how you communicate on those things. So legal teams are going to need to be stepping in a little bit more to support those marketing functions and those sustainability functions if they're not going to get caught out.
You worked in politics, right? And if you're looking at a Tinder box of crap messaging, politics is it, right? Ministers claim something, then the Sir Humphrey figure behind says, "No, you didn't say that. We can't put that out there." This is very interesting because over the last few years, you've worked for some big brands. Have you seen the pressures that were once in politics now coming into these brands? Because politics lives and dies on how the public see you. And brands didn't have as much of that before. It was like kind of, you're loyal to Apple or you're loyal. But now people go, well, hang on a second, where'd you get that? Where's that rare earth element come from? Where's all of this? So what I'm trying to say, the level of scrutiny politicians have always been under to make sure that they don't cock it up. Is that now transferring to brands in your view?
I think it really is. And I think it's happened for a couple of reasons. I think obviously with social media, and I
Yeah.
think the consumer is far more savvy than it has ever been. I think we are far more skeptical as well about businesses, particularly when they're making environmental claims. I think we all kind of raise a slight eyebrow because there's a huge level of mistrust, and there's lots of data out there to show that consumers feel a great sense of mistrust. But I think what's also happened is, again, looking at back at probably COVID onwards, businesses really started to take it upon themselves to have these sort of purpose statements. And don't get me wrong,
Yes.
I'm all
Yeah.
for businesses
Yeah. Yeah.
standing for
Yeah. Yeah.
something, I do think business should be a force for good in the world. But I think there was a level of naivety within a lot of these very big businesses coming out with some of these statements and positioning themselves on social causes, but not having the full depth of knowledge, evidence to kind of back this kind of thing up. And then they're sort of getting caught up in this. But of course, by that point, if you're going to come out with these high level statements that perhaps make a comment on things like human rights or
Yeah.
diversity,
Sustainable
then
development goals, all that stuff. Yeah.
exactly. Then if you start to do that, then the consumer is going to respond in kind and say, well, you know what, we are going to hold you to account then. Because if you're going to come out with these statements and you're going to talk about these things, which we applaud you for, we're going to give you a little bit more scrutiny then, because we're interested to know where you stand on these things and how you back it up. So I think your analogy about that shift between the kind of political world into
Mm.
perhaps some of the big corporate world is definitely happening.
How do I know if I'm being greenwashed?
I think some of the first things that you need to look at is when you see statements, whether it's on a product or you're looking at, company profile and this kind of stuff, where they are making a claim about their environmental credentials, have a look to see is there some asterisk somewhere where you can look down and check the data of where they've got that from. And when you look at that data, has it been verified by a third party? Because quite often a lot of that data around that does need to be third party verified as well by organizations like SBTI. So you need to make sure that when you're seeing some of these statements and claims, you can find the evidence, and you should be able to find the evidence easily if you want to be able to see that these statements have been backed up. That's a very simple, easy one to make sure that you're checking. But I think sometimes when you see things like, these shoes are sustainable,
Yeah.
and there's nothing else to say anything
Yeah.
else
Yeah.
around it, but you're just wearing
This
some
using this
sustainable
is
shoes.
using half the plastic. That's it.
It's
Really. Yeah.
exactly, it's just kind of not right.
It's
And that
marketing,
should
isn't it?
exactly,
Mm.
and that should ring alarm bells with the consumer as well.
You've got there on your site certified B, right? Corporation.
Mm.
You've got there. So you've gone through this process. Why did you go through it? Why did you
We
want to prove that you've got some environmental credentials.
So we're a small business compared to
Yeah.
these big guys,
Mm.
right? But we needed to go through some kind of scrutinous process around this so that we understood also what the pain points were that
Um,
some of our clients were going to face, right? So we could hardly profess or
yeah,
challenge or
exactly.
help these organizations go through these challenges if we haven't done it ourselves in our own way.
Yeah,
So for us, it was definitely a rite of passage. It wasn't easy. It
I was going to
remains
say.
not easy to hold yourself to account and continue to record what is quite a lot of data if you're a small organization. But we think it's the right way because we can hardly be in this world and not do it ourselves.
Where do we go with how this changes? We've got AI coming in, right? And I know you've been working on your own sort of AI platform, but AI is being used for everything these days. You're not AI, are you? I'm just checking. No, yeah.
I think I'm real.
No, no, you're real. Okay, I'm real, you're real. That's good. But I mean, this is the way it's going, right? Videos that, everyone's seen the Tom Cruise fighting Brad Pitt video, right? And it looks bloody good. Well, what's to stop someone making a video of like, oh, here we are planting loads of beautiful trees, and they're not doing it. How do we? Oh, look, we're capturing this carbon, but they're not doing it because they're using AI. These things are all about, we're struggling in my industry of, your industry as well, journalism communication, because there are so many false things out there. You see it on every social media thing that people are making lies up about things, and they're using quite convincing now. Normally it used to be crap, but they're getting better AI. So all of this, do you think this adds another level of scrutiny, but also another level of pitfalls for companies? Because they might go, well, let's just make a video about it and let's use AI without checking that they're doing it right. So of the two sides of it, one, will AI make things better for us as the public to scrutinize? And B, will it also offer more opportunities for us to be misled?
I mean, the annoying answer on that is it's both, isn't it? And I think it's going to do both. So I think the consumer can definitely be more empowered using AI and AI tools to check businesses and hold them to account. And particularly for you and I in the industry we work in,
Yeah.
it's really important to be able to use some of these AI tools to really check for scrutiny and to check for authenticity. And so I do think that they can help, but equally, AI is a really challenging topic around
Is
how you utilize it, particularly when we talk about greenwashing. Because I think with AI itself, if you're a team and a company and you're using AI to help you write or construct, whether it is your narrative for that
yeah,
video or
yeah.
a press release, the AI is not sufficient enough. It's not clever enough yet to be able to be a scrutinizing tool for that.
Mm.
We did an interesting test, actually. We did test out a number of LLMs with the same piece of information that we knew had some greenwashing issues within it. So we tested that out to see how did each of these LLMs respond. Each of them responded differently.
Mm.
Some were worse than others. Copilot was the worst, by the way. Um, they all responded differently, but all of them picked different claims.
Yes.
All of them either kind of highlighted issues that weren't there. A couple did go completely cuckoo and hallucinated completely. And importantly, if you put the same information in again, you'll get a very different answer.
Well, there you go.
So even that level of consistency and understanding
It's not there.
what is accurate isn't
Mm.
there. So I'm not saying that AI isn't useful to be able to kind of help construct your language or thinking and perhaps do some drafting. But I think the risk comes when you lean on it too heavily to check against kind of regulatory risk, or you lean on it to draft that communication in a way that doesn't properly understand the level of scrutiny that is going to be required, particularly for how you communicate on sustainability. So I think it's both. It can help, but I think it does have some real pitfalls, and it's important that people, I'm not saying don't use it, but I'm just saying be forewarned and,
Yeah.
test it out because you will get different results. I guarantee it.
One of the other sides of this is we talked really early on social media you mentioned, right? And we're a very sad state of affairs where I think with all the tools of communication, we're now further apart as people than we've ever been. So there is a little polarization, particularly in the world of environmentalism, you know, people just hate. They use the word hate, right? So they either hate a certain power system or a generation, or hate a company, you know, for either political reasons or whatever it is. Is there a danger of now? It was always seen, or I think it was always seen as a company makes a false claim, right? That's greenwashing. They say they're doing this. We're washing your clothes in 10 degrees, but it's not. It's at 70 degrees. Is there now a danger of bad agents, whatever you want to call it, creating greenwashing stories about you and planting that out there, claiming this? And then again, as you said, if you haven't got the facts to back it, any kind of grey area, there's a vacuum to be filled, isn't there?
It is. If you cannot prove it, it can be very challenging then to be able to stand up to scrutiny. And of course, if you did have a bad actor putting something
Mm,
like that out, there is, of course, quite a challenging regulatory risk as well. So it's not only reputational, which we know has a huge cost for businesses and they don't want, but there are some regulations out there now, if you're based in, Europe or UK,
yeah,
where it can be up to 10% of your global turnover. So these are not small, pithy little fines. These can be quite traumatic fines as well, and it has happened. So it is an absolutely real risk. And it's again why it's so important that these businesses are making, many of them are making huge investments into
yeah,
managing that data in the background and using AI in a really good way to keep focused on the data and holding that data. And we always say you should treat all of your sustainability communications in the same way that you would approach your financial data. It's the same kind of mindset that you need to maintain in order to help give you that proof and that backup.
where is the future? How do you see things going with greenwashing in the next, if you were going to give a company some tips on how to kind of navigate it, as you say, with these pressures of AI, the pressures of kind of a very intolerant society, which gets straight onto Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it, or any other social media and starts hammering you, people creating videos saying they're doing this and it's false narrative, you know. Um, how do you navigate it? What would you say to companies right
I mean, the first thing I say is don't stay silent. That's
now?
probably one of the worst things you can do.
That's what
So
they all do.
I
You know
know,
that, Helen.
I know. But there's a term for that now, did you know, called
Which is
green hushing, right?
green
And so
hashing. I didn't even
green
know
hushing, I know. So and that's not good either, because actually we know that these businesses also, if you're a certain size,
that.
you
Yeah,
do have a responsibility to report this data to your investors, to your board, and beyond, right? So staying silent isn't an option for, particularly if you're a big business. So you do need to speak out about these things, but how do you do that in a way that is as safe as possible? And how do we give confidence to those businesses? I want businesses to communicate on
yeah,
sustainability.
yeah.
I would say that, wouldn't I? But
Of
it's
course.
important, I think, for
Huh.
society, for businesses, and it's important
Well,
for that.
I wouldn't have a job. I wouldn't have, if they didn't tell us. And I agree with you that maybe the 99% nine, as I said, but I do believe, which is why this platform exists. There are very good people working in lots of good businesses who do care about the environment, who do care about what their companies are doing and
Mm.
how they're treating people and all that. But there is an element of it is kind of, I don't know, it just seems very, very, it's just too much to think about sometimes,
But I
which is why they
think
go under, they say nothing.
exactly. But I think, if you think about the leadership that is coming up, we know that generations perhaps below you and I are even more focused and see this topic as even more important.
Yeah,
So I do think it is going to, and I'm hopeful that it is going to elevate up the agenda. But I think there are some simple things that any business can think about when it comes to this. And I think we use what we call our impact methodology, right? But it's some things to think about when you're writing your approach. So you need to think about, does that communication, have you got integrity? Is there measurability?
yeah,
Can you prove what you're saying?
yeah.
Can you talk about the actions that you are taking? Is what you're saying consistent across all of your channels of communication? And are you being fully transparent? Can you show all of the data if you needed to? And I
Mm,
think if you think about those things, and it spells impact, right? But if you think about it in those terms, even if you do nothing else, when you have communications that focuses around sustainability, if you think about it in those terms and check your content against those criteria, that will take you some measurable way to being safe.
Do you think people will stop talking about their environmental sort of credits because they're just so nervous? I don't know if you've seen a downturn. Definitely people aren't doing their I'm committing to net zero as they were 5 years ago.
I think what's happened is people haven't necessarily, well, people have stopped talking in that type of language, but what people have started to do, and particularly with friends in the US, is the language, and you've probably seen this working in the energy space, the language has changed. So now this is about energy security,
Yeah.
long-term business resilience, security across your supply chain, sovereignty of your resources and your energy supply. We're looking at it much more in these kind of business boardroom type terms.
Rather
And
than it's good for the penguins. Yeah,
yes,
exactly.
and honestly, I don't think that's a bad thing. I think Trump probably did us all in the environmental movement a bit of a favor. And
Mm.
I know that sounds a little ironic,
No, no, I
but
get where you're coming from. Yeah, yeah.
we and I, I am part of this problem in that we spent too much focus on altruism and saying it's the right thing to do, and it not being board ready to make commitments and decisions where money flows. And I think what has happened is that language has started to change, and sustainability is now kind of moving into this space of long-term legacy building for your business. And actually, I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, yeah. Uh, Before we end, if you look at the way that we're communicating, I mean, God, go back to the beginning of my career. There was a newspaper, there was some radio, right? Now it's a plethora. And this is the final point I really want to make is businesses will start to have to adapt because who knows what's coming next, right? Who knows? Virtual reality, who knows what the hell they'll be. Um, do you think that the way that businesses communicate the good things they do, like you said, they'll need to give that more credence than just kind of, oh, it's a nice bit of PR, we'll put it out because it's all about the P&L. In a way, as you said, it can be so critical to everything in your business.
I think so. And I think they're going to need to do that more. And I think, we know that investors are looking at this space more. We know that
Mm.
consumers are demanding this more of business. I really do think we are seeing a shift in business. And I'm quite hopeful about it, to be honest with you, that business, despite this tumultural time that we're living in, I think businesses are still investing in this space. They're just not being very loud about it. And the evidence does suggest that investment has continued despite the kind of political
Yeah,
changes we've seen in the past 2 years. And I think that's really telling because I think businesses recognize that there is a trajectory that they want to go on that's not just about doing the right thing and being seen to do the right thing, but actually this makes long-term good business investment sense. And so I think sustainability isn't that fluffy topic that it was perhaps once seen as nice to do and let's all save the penguins. This is now becoming a much more hard, serious topic about how do we build that long-term resilience within our business because we need to. And I think that's not going to change. I think that's going to grow. And I think that is the part that is driving that continuous investment in this space still.
Helen, brilliant. You're a very good communicator. I don't know how you do it, really.
Thank you. I'm in communications. Did you know that?
Thanks very much for joining us on the podcast. Really enjoyed your time. Thanks a lot for your help today.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Let us know what you think. Have you had to think about your messaging? If you're a company that's trying to navigate greenwashing, let us know on social media what you think about that. Rob, thank you very much for the production this week. I'll catch you on the next episode of the Net Hero podcast.
You've just heard the Net Hero podcast from futurenetzero.com. Join us as we help you find ways to cut your carbon footprint as we head towards net zero. Subscribe and follow us on social media. futurenetzero.com. Better business, better planet.